Welcome to the Berkeley Climate Change Network podcast. I'm Bruce Riordan. I'm the director of the BCCN, and our special guest today is Rachel Morello Frosch, professor in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy and Management, and also in the School of Public Health. And with us today, because Rachel is the inaugural Associate Provost for Energy, Climate, and Environment, a new climate leadership role for the Berkeley campus. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks, Bruce. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
So thanks for taking some time to talk with us. Before we get into the new job and your vision for it and all, tell us a little about your background. We know you're a triple bear, but tell us how you got to Berkeley and all.
Well, I grew up not too far away in Santa Cruz, California. And my mother actually was a professor at Santa Cruz in Latin American literature. So I was always looking up the road, an hour and a half away, and would come up to the Bay Area quite a bit when I was in high school and just, fell in love with the campus, and it was so big and there was had so much to offer. So I was fortunate in that I was admitted to Berkeley and studied development studies here while an undergraduate. And then I took some time off and worked in the nonprofit sector in a civil rights organization for over 3 years. And then I returned to graduate school to get a master's in public health and epidemiology and biostatistics, and was thinking about going to medical school, but fell in love with public health and instead stayed and got my PhD in environmental health sciences. So, yeah, Berkeley, and I am definitely bleed blue and gold. And then I was away for a while. I postdoced in a couple of different places and taught at San Francisco State, and then I was at Brown University for 5 years. And then I had the amazing opportunity to come back here as a professor. It was a dream come true.
I met you, I think, in 2011 when you put out with others The Climate Gap, the big one of the first reports we've seen on climate justice and environmental justice. So I'm curious, you had 3 years at a nonprofit somewhere in there on environmental justice issues and all on health issues.
Yeah, so actually, my work was at an organization called Equal Rights Advocates that specialized in civil rights law, so the intersection of civil rights law as well as immigration law. And they were doing a lot of big cases like desegregating the Forest Service to enable the more women and people of color to get those amazing jobs, desegregating the San Francisco Fire Department, addressing labor and occupational issues and civil rights issues facing undocumented immigrants in the workplace. At that time, it was an open question whether undocumented people had standing in courts to enforce civil rights and labor rights laws. Um, and so in that role, they had a Women of Color project. I was their first policy advocate and did a lot of fundraising and working in that area. And I started to see the intersection of social justice issues, occupational health issues, environmental issues that a lot of the clients were facing in different contexts, which then made me realize that um, I could go back and become a scientist and maybe, and this was also a time when environmental justice movement was really emerging in the United States. And I started to sort of make some of the connections about the intersections of these issues. And that as a scientist, I could make a big contribution, which sent me back to thinking about either going to medical school or getting a PhD in environmental health.
Got it. Well, let's talk about the new job. Why Berkeley created this position, what it's going to look like with the this new office with a number of people that will work with you and for you. This is they're calling it a 3-year experiment. They called it that in the announcement looking for candidates, and you were selected. So talk about the new job.
Yeah, so this new job is the culmination of a lot of work by people across campus to encourage the administration to create a leadership, campus-wide leadership position in this field of energy, climate, and environment. Um, I was talking to Kathy Costin the other day. She says, it even started further back, like in the 1990s, with environmental initiatives and other kinds of things at Berkeley. So this has been a long time in coming. So I think one of the great things about this position is that it really is something that was created in response to demand from the campus itself. Um, and it has and I also am very grateful to a campus that has chosen to lean into this issue during this time when these issues of particularly climate and environment are not necessarily popular with the federal government and where there's been a lot of retrenchment and retreat. Um, and it is posed as a 3-year experiment, so it's the inaugural. I have a 3-year appointment to help launch this office. And the goal of it really is to has kind of a point focus. One is really elevating Berkeley's already transformational research in the environment, energy, climate, and environment space. And really that aligns with our mission of doing research and having research excellence with social benefits. Um, how do we enhance opportunities for community and policy engaged scholarship? Um, how do we incentivize a curricular coordination and also curricular innovation and make it easier for students at all different levels to find the courses and the training opportunities that they seek in the energy, climate, and environment space? And the third is how do we elevate and support efforts to improve and advance sustainable operations on our campus in collaboration with the Office of Climate and Solutions.
Great. So a 3-year experiment is how does that how does that fit you? How do you see that challenge ahead?
Well, I think a big part of this job is really like we're not creating a school, we're
Mhm.
not creating another organized research unit or an institute that's going to compete with all the great work that's already going here. The goal really is how do we support the great work that's happening here at Berkeley already, um, and make a lot of this work more than the sum of its parts by generating, obviously, fundraising and helping different groups, decanal units, departments, and organized research units raise money and partner with them to do that, enable people to find their people, if you will, when they're trying to build teams to launch new projects. I think one of the great things about Berkeley is there's a lot going on here. One of the challenges is sometimes it is very difficult to find your people, especially when you're new or even when you've been here for a while. So I think this office can also be a connector, both for our faculty, but also for our students who are seeking courses and mentorship and internship opportunities. Um, and then how can we create, programs and opportunities that would be attractive to the campus and faculty, regardless of what discipline they're in? So, for example, how can we bolster and create, for example, graduate and or postdoctoral fellowships that enable them to do kind of their traditional training, whether they're in the social sciences, humanities, or STEM fields, but then also provide additional layer of training that can enable people to enhance the relevance, reach, and policy impact of their work.
You know, BCCN is obviously very excited about being a part of this now and being a part of something bigger on the campus. Talk a little about the other positions that are going to be a part of this ECE office that you're going to lead.
Yeah, well, I feel like BCCN is the foundation for the future launch of this office. All the work that you and BCCN has done over the years to connect, to be a concierge, if you will, create hubs and connections and build community, sort of have provided an amazing foundation upon which the office can build. And so for that, I'm super grateful. Um, so the campus has really invested heavily in the success of this position, and in addition to creating the position that I've been appointed to, um, We will have a communications person. Be able to have an executive assistant that will help the team. We will get a chief development officer that will help us with fundraising, which will be a huge part of what we're going to be trying to do. And we will also have a shoot. I just said comms person, chief development officer, executive assistant,
Staff assistant, kind of, well, you got
and
that.
executive director.
Okay.
So, and we will be we are already starting, even though I don't start until July 1st, we are already launching the hiring process to get going on that for those four positions.
Great. Um, let's talk a little. I know you don't start till July 1st, but you're obviously working on this already and you have a vision. You presented a vision to the powers that be that got you the job in the first place. So maybe talk a little big picture about your vision for Berkeley and climate over the next, few years.
Well, so again, like those kind of four pillars, promoting and making the existing transformational research be bigger than the sum of its parts. I think that piece really trying to stimulate transdisciplinary
Hmm.
collaborations through, for example, research cluster grants, which obviously will require some fundraising, and we can start small, but to build it to something substantial. And then also creating opportunities regularly throughout the academic year, something that I'm calling Spark workshops or space for alternative research collaborations, where we can identify an energy, environment, and climate topic and encourage a couple of people to give flash talks, invite anyone who's interested in this topic to come together, over lunch, for example, have a couple of flash talks from very different disciplinary perspectives to then launch a conversation about potential collaborations or, future workshops where we could invite external people and really think about building teams and launching new projects. Um, Conferences and events where, we're both internally and externally facing, where we're trying to grapple with big issues and invite people from our other universities that are working on these issues to grapple with them. Be great. My goal would see if we could have, an annual major conference on on an emerging energy, climate, and environment topic. In terms of community engaged and policy engaged scholarship, which, is a huge part of, Berkeley's DNA. Um, Again, I'm really excited about the prospect of trying to build a postdoctoral and or graduate fellowship program that could be where that would be available to anyone on campus in terms of discipline. The application process could be similar to, for example, the Chancellor's Fellowship, but we would create cohorts of very multidisciplinary people who would then also be getting training on how do you really translate the results of your research and drive the climate conversation, for example, either through reaching decision makers or engaging with the media in short form and long form writing. How do you raise money? How do you direct teams and kind of take your work to the next level? And I think doing that in a cohort kind of way, I've been fortunate to be part of fellowships of that sort, have can be transformational for particularly for early career stage folks. Visiting scholar fellowships um, with, for example, different partners, either, from decision makers to community partners, industry partners that are working and grappling with climate change challenges, and then undergraduate fellowships to enable undergraduates to get paid internships with organizations that may not be able to afford to pay them, but we would provide them the salary to be able to go do those kinds of internships. So, really providing what what people here like to call change maker training at all different levels. And then in terms of curricular innovation, things that you and I, Bruce, have been talking about. How do we create a there around climate at Berkeley? We have so many students that are very eager to get training, and right now, it's really hard for them to find the courses and the opportunities because things are somewhat segmented. So can we create a hub where people can find their courses, where people can be directed to potential mentorship opportunities, internship opportunities? Um, can we expand course innovation seed grants to encourage multidisciplinary courses that could fill curricular gaps, while also encouraging some more curricular coordination by having it more centralized in terms of what is available on campus and where students can go, not only undergraduates, but also for graduate students. And then how do we support initiatives in campus like, Nathan Yandel's office on climate and sustainability solutions? He's doing this great program on the Living Lab and, the campus as a lab to test ideas for improving campus sustainability in its operations. So those are kind of, the ideas, and those are kind of big picture. So it's great to present these ideas. And so the big part of it is also getting feedback along the way and prioritizing, because, we do only have 3 years. But I think you need to build a long-term vision to have a sense of where you're headed beyond those 3 years, and then prioritize in the short term.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit to wind up here about how faculty or staff or students can engage with you as you're starting to take the first and second steps now with getting your job descriptions and the hiring of new people. And then July 1 will be here pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
How can we, if faculty and staff and students that are listening to this podcast and want to talk with you or provide some input, how can we do that?
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy if people want to email me at rmf@berkeley.edu. Um, and I'm already, I'm technically on sabbatical at Harvard right now, but as you know, I've been working on getting ready and building the runway so that we can really take off when I start on July 1st with a lot of partners. I'd like to, most recently in the last few weeks, have been consulting a lot with the Senate Task Force on Climate Research and Education. And I would like to build on that task force to create a larger kind of launch advisory committee, which I think we want representation, obviously, from our faculty colleagues who are in this, working in the environment and energy and climate space, and also students and staff. So I will definitely be reaching out to folks, but right now I've just been focusing on trying to get these job descriptions written so that we can start advertising for these positions. But so I want to create some kind of structure for feedback in terms of advisory committee. Um, Also, want to create some advisory committee of people who've been supportive of Berkeley and who are deeply committed to its mission and also care a lot about environmental and climate issues, because I think they can provide incredible advice in addition to support as we move forward and articulate our vision.
Great. And we can use the BCCN newsletter out every other
Yeah,
week as a further communication device when you can talk to me about your ideas as they progress over the next few weeks.
yeah.
And we can, if we come up with some things and other questions for people to help us with, we can use the newsletter, I think, for some of that.
And the last thing, I just really want to make a plug. I know, this time of the semester, people are sometimes feel like they're limping to the finish line because there's so much going on. But we do have a strategic planning process going on. It's an accelerated strategic planning process, and this is also a huge opportunity to weigh in on the importance of elevating energy, climate, and environment as a strategic priority. And there's also opportunities to contribute additional ideas that you may not necessarily see in the rubric. They're holding focus groups. And so even with just a tiny bit of time, just contributing and really ensuring that this issue area, which is so important and so urgent, gets elevated in the strategic planning process is going to be super important.
Great. Well, one final question for today, and this has been very helpful, Rachel. What message would you send to students, to young people now about climate and about the whole climate and energy world that we're in? What message would you send about hope, about how to how to take this forward, how fast we can go, all of that?
Yeah. Well, um, I think it can seem really overwhelming right now, given the headwinds that this area is facing, to feel pessimistic. And um, to me, implementing hope is just continuing to do the work and building the community of people who are also doing the work from which you gain your strength. Um, and there's still a lot of joy in doing this work, particularly when you're collaborating with community partners and decision makers and you see your victories, um, whether it's at a local or municipal or state scale. I think it's also important. We're very fortunate. We are in California. And even though sometimes, particularly now, we're portrayed as a bunch of weirdo, radical, whatever, we are the fourth largest economy in the world. So regardless of whether people like California or not, they listen to what we do, and we've uh, had demonstrated decades and decades of leadership on environmental issues, and we're going to continue to do that. And we're really fortunate to be part of the UC system and at Berkeley, where our work and our hard work will can have benefits at a state scale, so that when things change at the federal level and the international level, and they will, the question is when. Um, a lot of the lessons that have come out of California have influenced federal initiatives in the past, and I have no doubt that they will in the future.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for taking the time to talk with us today, and we look forward to working with you in the coming weeks and months, and we look forward to through BCCN over maybe the next couple of months communicating more to follow up on this podcast with the Berkeley audience.
Great.
You've been
Thanks, Bruce.
you're welcome. You've been listening to the BCCN podcast with our new Associate Provost for Energy, Climate, and the Environment, Rachel Morello Frosch. I'm Bruce Riordan. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more podcasts from the Berkeley Climate Change Network.